We're delighted to be with you today, and we welcome you. Today's program is, again, one of a series where we are featuring the work of our community and reaching out across the state, and really what we found with these across the nation, to talk to you about what's going on here in Leon County and what might be happening in our surrounding areas, as well as in your hometowns. Like many of you, we have a coalition called the Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking. I'm honored to co-chair that coalition here in Tallahassee with our U.S. Attorney's Office, Michelle Spaven. And we're very eager to always have new members and new involvement with BBCAT. So I like to have this slide up to let you know you can contact Kelly, and we can talk about, you can join us and you can be aware of what's going on in our area. And an abiding need at the bottom of this slide, you can see, is to focus on what we can do to do a better job of building trust with the people who are out there, whether they're helpers or actual survivors of human trafficking, how we can reach out to them so they will contact us and we can provide them support, safety, and what's needed so their lives can get on track. So this is our BBCAT. Please call us if there are any questions and we'll let you know. And BBCAT is a proud sponsor of this event. I'm the executive director of STAC, which is the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. We're a local nonprofit. We assist all survivors of human trafficking, whether sex or labor trafficking, whether an adult, a youth, or whether someone is a U.S. citizen or is an immigrant to our area. In other words, we serve as a hub agency for anyone who is at risk of being trafficked, as well as someone who is trafficked, to help prevent human trafficking. We provide direct case management and support to survivors of sex and labor trafficking. And the only way we do this is with the many partners in our community. And I'm just looking to see if there are any local folks here too. And I do see some local people that we work with. Welcome everybody. Welcome Sarah. Graciela Marquina, who is our community services advocate, is on with us. Graciela, good to have you on this one too. We're doing more and more outreach to rural areas, and we're really doing a lot. And I say public awareness here only insofar as we're talking about public awareness that leads to direct action. I think we've gone through a lot of awareness activities, and where we are right now is saying, what can people do wherever they sit, whether it's in an office, whether it's in a hospital, whether it is in your own home and you're looking around your own neighborhood. So there's always something that we can be taking action to do. Specifically, we work with a lot of different agencies, businesses, and others around the community to do the work we do. And it is indeed the only way we can do the work we do. You can see our website here, and I want to highlight this website because this is a place where you can get past Third Friday community programs like this, the webinars. You can get lots of other information, and you'll also see additional programs on the topic of human trafficking that we do outside of our work with USF. All of our services are free of charge. All of our training materials, our general training materials, are also free of charge. And so we always appreciate any help you can provide in terms of support, sharing this information, being a part of it, and also visiting our website. Know that another thing we have is we have a lot of handouts. We have posters. You might know Florida law requires that all healthcare settings have a poster in English and Spanish around this issue of human trafficking, and that highlights the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So know we've got a lot of stuff. We'd love to get it to you, so please be in contact. Coming soon, stacpro.org, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, but know that right now you can go on this website and pre-register to take a 1-hour program it's on-demand certificate-based program. And we encourage you to do that. We have a special guest who's going to talk about that a little bit more, but I wanted to right off the top let you know that this is a place where you can go and take a training that's really focused on businesses and literally all workplaces in our community. Okay, now I'd like to take a pause and let you all know that you are really lucky today because we're doing something very special before we start our regular programming. I'd like to welcome Commissioner Rick Miner, who is Leon County Commissioner, District 3, here in Florida's Panhandle. One of the things, and if you don't mind, Commissioner Minor, I'd like to just give people a little bit of context for our work together, and thank you. Because first of all, Commissioner Minor has been the person who is singularly focused on this issue on our local government board. And may you all be so lucky to have someone as involved as Commissioner Minor is on recognizing the importance of this issue, and also being able to make sure that his recognition and of how important it is translates into actual support and funding. The other thing that he's done is created a task force to focus on one of our local area trafficking hotspots, if you will, but also recognizing that this is a countywide issue. I'd also like to say that he's been involved for many years with our community in depth. And really, I can't tell you how grateful I am, Commissioner Minor, for all you've done. And today you're here to, I guess, formally present a proclamation recognizing this month, which again has really sprung from your work. What I'd like to turn the program over to you for this brief presentation.
Thank you, Robin, for those very kind words, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Commissioner Rick Minor of the Leon County Board of County Commissioners. On behalf of the county, I want to welcome you all to the very first STAC training of 2022. Since 2015, STAC has been on the front line, educating individuals and businesses in our community to recognize and respond to human trafficking to help end this crime. And the county is proud to partner with this dedicated organization to provide STAC Pro, the new, highly effective, localized training to help workplaces disrupt sex and labor trafficking in our community. This training will give you and other local businesses the tools necessary to identify and prevent human trafficking of vulnerable communities. As you will learn today, the business community and workplaces throughout the county play a pivotal role in identifying, preventing, and ending human trafficking. In recognition of STAC's dedication to this cause in Leon County, we present to the organization this proclamation recognizing January as National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. This proclamation is signed by all the county commissioners and attested by County Commissioner Vincent S. Long. On behalf of Leon County and the citizens of our community, thank you all for everything you do to end human trafficking. And thank you very much, Robin, for the opportunity to be here. Good luck.
Thank you very much. I feel like this is one of the outgrowths of being in a pandemic, right? We're not doing this before one of your meetings, but still we're so very honored and happy. And also to note in that proclamation, we do talk about the many different entities in our community that we work with, and we're honored to be part of looking at this issue. So thank you very much. Today, I'm very honored to be co-presenting with Marina Anderson, who many of you know because she has been on this training program. Marina, how many times? I think I've lost track. It's at least half a dozen, and maybe even we're cresting, over 10 or 12. But Marina is the Regional Human Trafficking Coordinator for Northeast and Northwest regions from the Florida Department of Children and Families. She is an expert in this area, has been part of the work of DCF in this field at many different levels. And Marina, I just want to tell you, I'm grateful so much to be doing this with you today. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is Commissioner Minor just talked about an effort here called STAC Pro that I'd mentioned earlier. And what I thought I could do today is give you a little bit of perspective from a local business leader here in Tallahassee. Heidi Otway is president of Salter Mitchell, and what she has done has been remarkable. She's promoted this issue from the perspective of not just being a business owner and being a small business here in Leon County, but she's done so from a leadership position with the local Greater Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce. You'll hear from Heidi a little bit about why it's important for businesses. And I see some of you who are on the call here now. I see you've talked about some of you are from business, some of you are for our advocates and nonprofits. You'll see how we all do need to work together on this. So here's a little bit from Heidi so you can get a sense of what our training will be about today and really what you can do going forward.
Hello, my name is Heidi Otway, and I'm the president and partner of Salter Mitchell Public Relations. I'm also the former chair of the Greater Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce. As a business leader and longtime resident in this community, I was surprised to learn that human trafficking was taking place here and have since made a commitment to raise awareness in the business community to help uproot and end this horrible practice. I first learned about it while serving as chair of the chamber when a local businessman came to me and said he thought he saw evidence of human trafficking near his company. I was shocked and could not believe this was happening in Tallahassee. Unfortunately, it is, and I believe businesses can be front and center by learning the signs of human exploitation and alerting authorities like this businessman did. Human trafficking hurts our community and it hurts businesses. For example, someone posted a comment on a popular tourism app telling others to avoid hotels and parts of our community because they saw trafficking taking place there. We don't want this type of publicity. We also don't want to keep traffickers in business here. So what can you do, and how can your workplace take action to put human traffickers out of business? The first step is to pay attention to possible signs of trafficking and learn how to respond if you suspect a labor or sex trafficking situation. Businesses that do this are safer and limit risks to the public and their own staff, and also demonstrate corporate social responsibility. It's also wise to protect yourself from potential legal liability. As you know, proactive training, monitoring, and reporting protocols can help you to be a stronger, safer, and better business. This course will help you do that. You'll also receive good information about resources where you can get help. Regardless of your industry, business sector, how many employees you have, or your role in the company, I urge you to learn more about human trafficking by taking this course. Once you know and see the signs, you, your coworkers, and your employees will be empowered to help save someone and rid our community of this criminal activity and enterprise that tears families apart, traumatizes children and adults for a lifetime, and damages the reputation of our beloved Tallahassee community and the Big Bend region.
As Robin said, my name is Marina Anderson. I'm with the Department of Children and Families. I'm the Human Trafficking Coordinator for Northeast and Northwest regions. So we are going to be talking today about human trafficking, both sex trafficking and labor trafficking, and what you may be seeing in your workplaces. And this presentation was created to really cover all kinds of workplaces. As you know, there's many legislative mandates within Florida that particular professions have human trafficking training, including some business areas such as healthcare, as well as hospitality. Our educators, our Department of Children and Families, and our community-based care agencies also have to have a mandated human trafficking training hours. So I will implore you through this training to really be thinking about what you may see and how you may come in contact with a potential victim of trafficking. And by the end of this presentation, I hope that you'll have a better understanding of what actually human trafficking is, the scope of the issue, not only in your local area, but statewide and nationwide as well. I hope also that by the end of this presentation, you will be able to know what to do if you do suspect trafficking is occurring. At the end of this presentation, I will be giving you some hotline numbers to contact. I would ask that you either have something to write down or take a screenshot or a picture of the screen. This is also being recorded and you can go back and review it at your leisure as well. Also, there'll be a QR code at the end and you can go ahead and utilize that and being able to scan that QR code. That way it links to our National Human Trafficking Hotline as well. So that will be at the end of the presentation, but I just wanted to go ahead and give you a heads up about that. So the most common question that is asked is, why is human trafficking such an issue? Oftentimes people say, well, we know that human trafficking or prostitution, it goes back to biblical days. Why is now such a problem? Well, there's many, many reasons for that, but it's a lucrative business. So unlike drugs and arms trade, human trafficking continues to exploit their victim after the initial point of sale, meaning that they can sell their victim over and over again. If they sell a drug, if a drug dealer sells a drug, they have to go back for more drugs to be able to sell, right? Or if they sell a weapon, they have to go back for more guns to sell. Whereas they can sell a person over and over and over again. And that's with sex trafficking or labor trafficking, right? So that is why it's such an issue. And it kind of gives you a better perspective of really what we're talking about. They estimate forced labor and human trafficking is a $150 billion industry nationwide. There's no official rate for the total number of human trafficking victims in U.S. to date. We at the Department of Children and Families investigate all areas of trafficking, which I'm going to go over that in just a second. But also, and we're able to keep data on the reports that we receive with the minor victims and the service delivery that was received. But when it comes to adult victims, that's a little bit harder. That data is a little bit harder to capture. So we know that there's way more victims of trafficking that's out there than we know about. So it's really hard to say exactly what the rate is, the official rate, and the total numbers of human trafficking that's happening in Florida or happening in the U.S. But we know that the data that we do have, we know that it could probably double, triple, and so forth, that those numbers. We know in 1 in 3 teens will be approached for recruitment by a trafficker within 48 hours of leaving a home and becoming homeless. I should also note during this presentation, if I use the term trafficker, I am referring to a pimp. We don't use the word pimp because it's not in our legal language, and honestly, it's a glorified word. So we want to use the word trafficker because that's the terminology that's in our language. You may hear me say victim, survivor, or thriver. It depends on in how I'm referring to in which slide I'm on. But I'm referring to a victim of trafficking. But we do know that victims of trafficking are survivors, and there definitely are thrivers. So we definitely, I use that sometimes interchangeably as well. You may hear me say the word buyer. When I'm referring to a buyer or a buyer of sex, I'm referring to a John. Again, John's not in legal language. We would use buyer as that terminology. We know the average of entry into the commercial sex industry in the U.S. is between the ages of 12 and 14 years of age. So a lot of times people think, oh, well, they're 18 or they're 19. It's their choice. This is something that they want to do. And maybe there's not a third party. Maybe there's not a trafficker. But we know on average that the age of entry begins at 12, 14. So they were actually a victim of trafficking as a minor, but maybe we did not recover or did not recognize that they were a victim of trafficking until maybe they were of age or they were over the age of 18. Polaris estimates the total number of victims in the United States reaches into the hundreds of thousands. Again, not necessarily being able to capture that exact number. We know human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal industry in the world. We know annually the money illegally acquired through human trafficking is estimated to be more than 35 billion. So is that really that big of a problem? I want you to think about that. 35 billion. What does that look like? So to kind of wrap your mind around what 35 billion looks like, if you combine Nike, Google, and Starbucks revenue, annual revenue combined, that's about 35 billion. So think about that. That's how much traffickers, both labor trafficking and sex trafficking, are making in their revenue. It's huge. It's a huge white collar crime, right? It's an organized crime. A lot of times when people think of organized crime, they're not really thinking of human trafficking, right? But we know it can be your lowest level drug dealer within your local community. That is also trafficking men and women, boys and girls. We know our LGBTQ plus community is targeted at high rates. But you also got to think about those higher level traffickers. We refer to those as your CEO traffickers, traffickers that may have legitimate businesses, but might also be running underground businesses also to supplement income. And of course, we're not going into a lot of great detail of that, but I want you to think, you're reading the headlines, a lot of publicity, especially over the past few months, about some of those traffickers that are on that higher end level, the traffickers that are within your business community. That is something also for you to look for, especially business owners. Is there something that just doesn't really seem right? Is there something that you feel, and this is something oftentimes that we see, like their income that's bringing in is more than you suspect it should for whatever business that they may be owning. So is there money laundering going on, or is there maybe some trafficking going on? We've had several tips that came in just for that fact alone. So, Robin, you're going to take it on from this point.
Yes, thank you, Marina. And thank you for providing that context. I think it's really one of the most vital things. And as being part of this movement or part of the world where we've been looking at this issue now for almost 20 years, I have to say we've not yet gotten to the place where, even though we've talked about everybody in the community, we've done an excellent job of focusing on training for those places most likely to encounter trafficking, like the healthcare world or law enforcement, DCF, like you said. And what we've all come to know better than ever is that everybody's got a role. We always say it takes a village to address human trafficking. So when we talk about the workplaces, I really challenge anybody to say there's no way human trafficking is affecting my workplace, because it would, whether it's the labor that's providing the actual service, whether it is any kind of supplies that you're receiving. If you're a restaurant, what are you serving? Has the food been picked by hands that are free, or are those who've been trafficked? It has to do with who's providing cleaning services to your offices, or who's doing landscaping work, or who might be taking, might be in a hotel situation. So we really want you to think broadly about this. And also, Marina, I want to sort of hearken people back, if they didn't see the program that we did called Follow the Money, Find the Traffickers, and then the follow-up you did for how traffickers target youth financially in particular. I really encourage you to look at that, because we took a hard look at, on the right-hand side here, you see a picture of Capital City Bank. That's a local bank here where STAC provided some training to their public-facing staff. And I will tell you, within a couple of days of providing that training, that a teller put the pieces together in her head and helped uncover a money laundering situation that was a trafficking situation. So know that this is something that, again, businesses, customers, employees, managers, suppliers are all the eyes and ears where we can detect human trafficking. And here are some examples of restaurant, hospital, office parks, and again, a financial institution where this is happening. On the next slide, you'll see some other examples, and this is really coming out of the National Human Trafficking Hotline has lots and lots of great resources, and we're going to go through these next really quickly, because I just want you to see and understand that human trafficking can be in any of these places, right? It could be when you're going on your next vacation. We mentioned healthcare, logging, forestry, carnival, especially as I think about carnivals, I think about movement of people from one town to another. Again, not necessary to have movement for there to be trafficking, but a great way for traffickers to control someone's very existence by moving them from place to place so they can't get rooted and develop a support network. The next slide as well gives us some more examples of where you might see, again, potential workplaces, illicit activities. And if this is going to scroll again like that, there we go. We can have, again, landscaping. I got a call from someone who said something didn't look right in a parking lot, Publix parking lot, where someone was putting in new landscaping. They really had some concerns and fears that the people doing that work. So they called STAC, and we and Graciela was able to go and talk with some of the workers and determine no, there wasn't any kind of coercion or any kind of, that they were actually working. But somebody had it in their head that this might be a trafficking situation, and we're always grateful for those calls, believe me. Agriculture, animal husbandry. So in our area of Leon County, sometimes you think of the capital city, you think about all the high, the businesses and the buildings in the background, but we're also a rural area. We have a lot of farms. We have migrant farm worker streams come through our area, both in Leon and surrounding counties, all of our surrounding counties. I mentioned health and beauty services here, and really preparing this content for this training. it became clear to me that you might see a trafficker bringing a victim in who's in the grooming process, right, Marina? I mean, you could have, and there isn't necessarily the coercion, but that might be the time where that's part of the grooming, the building trust. Oh, let me buy you these services. Let's do whatever you do to make yourself feel good and pretty, and that might be where you see something quite off if you are in a beauty salon operator or hairstylist, etc. People don't often think that when someone is begging that is a trafficking situation. You might not understand that could be an organized criminal network where literally traffickers are forcing people. This is their labor to peddle and to beg. This slide also contrasts that you have both illicit activities, drug sales, other kinds of crime taking place. And you also have things happening right under your nose, and you can't tell by looking at somebody that they might be a current victim of trafficking. Okay, next slide, please. And here are yet some more. We're going to talk more about traveling sales crews later, but know that, all over the sex industry, whether it's strip clubs, porn, camming, a slide earlier talked about any kind of video sex services. That is one thing, according to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, that since the pandemic, we have seen two essential areas explode in terms of calls to that hotline. One is the online sex trafficking, online activity, and the other is the exploitation and trafficking of H-2A visa holders. These are the agricultural workers who were deemed essential at the beginning of the pandemic. So yeah, all these places, again, outdoor solicitation, you'll see these, and some of these I think are kind of more typical of what you might traditionally think of as places where sex trafficking might be happening.
Right. If I could just add, Robin.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Since the pandemic, we've had a huge issue with that online recruitment and the online solicitation. And also children understanding that they can sell pictures of themselves online for large amounts of money. And so almost every case that we staff, 80 to 85% of the cases right now are dealing with that online recruitment, online solicitation piece. So that's so very important. Also about going back to the cosmetology businesses, whether it be hair, nails, that's some of the number one things that we see. And that's one of the number one red flags that we look for. If they are, if a person, whether it's an adult or a child, is receiving these items, and they're usually going to say their friend is buying these items for them, they're purchasing these items, they're paying for them to get their hair done, their nails done. And I just really want you to think about that. You guys have some great friends, I'm sure, but they're probably not paying for you to get your hair done every 6 weeks, your nails done every couple of weeks. And that is a grooming technique that traffickers oftentimes use. And they will also utilize that throughout the trafficking occurrence, because a buyer wants to have someone that's visually appealing. So they want them to have their hair done, their nails done. They want them to smell good, have nice clothes, or what have you. And so traffickers will be bringing people in, whether it's male, female, whether it's taking them males to the barber shop, taking the females to the beauty shop, taking them to get their nails done, so forth and so on. You are going to come in contact. I've been getting my nails done and saw something extremely suspicious, and to come to find out it was a trafficker that was bringing in several females to get their nails, their manicures and pedicures done. So again, you have to keep your eyes open, not only in the businesses that you may be working in, but also the businesses that you frequent, constantly wondering and looking and paying attention, and paying not only about things that's being said, because victims are not going to usually self-disclose. So even if you come up and you say, "Are you okay?" they're probably going to say, "Oh, yes," most likely, or no one's hurting them, because they're scared, they're fearful. They don't want, or maybe they don't see themselves as a victim of what's exactly happening. They feel that they're a participant. But you have to really pay attention to the body language, and not only of the potential victim, but the possible buyer or possible trafficker as well.
Yeah, and actually stay on that slide for a sec, Marina. I want to go back to one thing there on that last slide. This bars, strip clubs, and cantinas, I want to mention something and also let you know about something that's happening next week. We are doing a program next week on Tuesday called Human Trafficking and Its Effect on Campus. And the reason we're doing that in part is with our wonderful partner, the International Rescue Committee. But when we were having one of our calls with them, we were talking about the vulnerability of students in higher education to just this issue. What do they need to know? What is their vulnerability? And it got us to thinking that this is something we should focus on. And just as we were talking about it, one of our colleagues in Miami, the people we work with at the IRC in Miami, talked about something they called Tuition Tuesdays. And they had heard about it as they were doing some outreach at FIU, Florida International University. And what Tuition Tuesdays was and is a time that local strip clubs actually go on campus and recruit students to come and work there to strip. Because the cost of higher education has gone through the roof, they actually, their come on is to say to young women who are at college, at the university, come work for us so we can help you pay your tuition. So, I mean, that just made a light go off in our heads. And I'm sure, Marina, your head is probably going like, I can imagine what happened next, right? I mean, the usual story about, yeah, you strip, yes, you're beautiful. And then the coercion that happens after that into deeper sort of, coerced work, whether it's prostitution or whether it's other kinds of commercial sexual activity. So know that, that's out there, and there's a program going to be on Tuesday so we can talk about that. Okay, next slide. One of the reasons that we're doing this program and why we're having the STAC Pro program launch soon is that we really want to give businesses both the pluses and the minuses of why, if you don't do it, what difference does it make, right? So in these 4 areas, it's really important. And this is also something that you can use, whether you're, a customer to business or whether you are, know someone who owns a business or works. It really makes sense. The cost benefit analysis could not be clearer as to why you need to know about this issue. You can't keep your head in the sand or put your head in the sand or turn a blind eye to it. So there are safety risks of not doing this. The risks of ignoring puts your own workforce and the public in danger. You could see that. And if you do something about it, of course, things will be safer. And we also find that if you do something, employee morale will go up because it shows you care about the people who are working there and who are connected to your workplace. With financial, you heard from the opening video with Heidi that, yeah, it was right on a Travelocity or one of those sites where someone said, don't stay at this hotel, human trafficking's there. That could be a direct revenue loss. And the reason why for the STAC Pro content, after somebody finishes that, they're going to get a certificate and they're going to get an emblem if 75% of their workforce takes this training. It's a positive, good corporate citizen thing to do, and it encourages people to reach out. Under the legal liabilities and pluses and minuses, we have clearly seen civil and corporate liability. More and more hotels especially are facing lawsuits from former victims of human trafficking, survivors who are saying you turned a blind eye to what was going on to me, how I was trafficked. And again, there's liability there. Getting trained, knowing what to do is just like anything else for a business. It's to do that risk management. It's to do that assessment. You don't want any illegal activity being connected to your business if you're a smart business owner. And of course, the reputation, again, I just mentioned the Travelocity thing, but you know how it is. You don't want to be associated with a supply chain, workers at your establishment or other aspects of human trafficking. In fact, you want to be that good corporate citizen. And really, this is something that to be family friendly, to be however you want to pose this is a way of showing who you are as a local business and as a workplace, for-profit or nonprofit, that you care about your employees and the community. Okay, next slide. And so this next slide is kind of going to show a little bit what we did. And I say this because a lot of you are from all over the state of Florida, and also because you are in other parts of the country. But Leon County actually funded STAC to create the content for this. We've been doing this in partnership with a lot of people. We're also pulling together this will be an online, as I said, on-demand program. And the reasons were, number one, we did see a huge shift, and we are still experiencing a huge shift because of COVID, with the economic realities facing people in our area, businesses struggling, people losing work, economic insecurity, and really the need for us to become a stronger place and a fortified place, right? The private sector, as it was hit hard, needs help. And so the best thing we thought we could do was pull together a training that every single business in our area could take, so they could get that help and it wouldn't cost them. In fact, it's a free training. It's something that the only thing a business has to do is say, here's an hour of your time. I'd like you to take this, and get that employee and that manager to take the training. We know that most businesses are not aware of what human trafficking looks like. I still get people saying human trafficking is going on here, because the media is so prolific at talking about human trafficking as if it only happens in either large jurisdictions or foreign countries. But yeah, it could be one person trafficking one other person. It could be an organized crime ring. It could be any number of places. And certainly the cases we've seen in our area reflect that. I think I mentioned earlier, STAC's caseload has tripled since the onset of the pandemic. And that's both in sex and labor trafficking. And we also know Leon County has taken a stand that it's good public policy to fortify your community with this knowledge. So that's why our county commission stepped up to fund this. And we're just really grateful for it, and encourage you to kind of reach out to your own local governments and see what they're going to do. Also, I want to take, before we go to the next slide, actually, we can go to the next slide now. And what I want you to know is here's how the training is broken out. Very practical, very hands-on, really covers everything from the financial sector to offices to, and I bet y'all didn't know this, but the convenience store industry actually has its own video webinars as well, or they have stickers, they have all these things. There are businesses all over this nation that have realized that this impacts them, hotels, et cetera. And it's more than, again, what, as Marina said, what the Florida law is mandating people to do. It's every single one. So just learning about, this will help you learn about something called organized retail crime, where traffickers literally force people to steal gift cards, to shoplift, and then they use the proceeds from those thefts to resell things online, on Amazon. It's organized retail crime, ORC. So there are all these ways that businesses are involved unwittingly or wittingly, and how what they're doing now can be enhanced and supplemented by knowledge of what human trafficking could look like in their business setting and in their workplace setting. And these are, again, the objectives for the training. Okay, next slide.
Thanks, Robin. So I'm going to go ahead and let's talk about what sex trafficking is. So by Florida definition, it's the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purpose of commercial sex acts, in which the commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such an act has not attained 18 years of age. So the gist of this definition If you have a minor, someone under the age of 18, we do not have to prove force, fraud, or coercion because they can't consent. Child prostitution is illegal. Therefore, they cannot be arrested for child prostitution. However, we do not have to prove force, fraud, or coercion to investigate these cases, to verify these cases, and to move forward not only with our DCF investigations and community referrals and services, but also through prosecution on the state and federal level as well. Now, if they're over the age of 18, we do have to prove that force, fraud, and coercion piece because they are an adult and they could possibly consent. So we need to make sure that we understand that. So again, the big thing here is just understanding, because we get a lot of cases where they said, well, no, it was a minor and no one was making them do this. They were on their own. Well, it doesn't matter if they're on their own. If they're bartering a ride out of town for a sexual act and there's no one making them, they're still a verified victim because they're under the age of 18 and they cannot consent. As far as Department of Children and Families, we investigate all areas of trafficking here in Florida. So if it's trafficker led, meaning there's a third party that's brokering the exchange of the sexual acts for something of value. And again, it could be anything you can put a price tag on. They may provide drugs, marijuana, alcohol to the minor for exchange for sexual acts. We see them giving them a place to sleep or a place to stay, ride out of town. Again, is very common. These are all common things. Hair and nails and tangible items such as those type of things is very, very common also. Remembering traffickers can be any age, any gender, any background. We investigate gang trafficking. Gang trafficking has been increasing over the past several years. We've had a lot of crackdowns, both on state and federal levels, with drug trafficking. Again, gangs know that they sell a drug, they have to go back and, replenish that with more drugs, where they can sell a person over and over again. And so they're getting more and more involved. Gang trafficking is some of the hardest cases that we work. Gangs oftentimes do not roll on each other. They don't talk because of the fear of what could happen to them, the retaliation that would happen. So again, those cases are very, very difficult to work. Familial trafficking, with the opioid crisis that we have, we've seen more and more cases of familial trafficking where parents or caregivers are selling pictures of their minors for money or for drugs. We've seen a huge issue with minors becoming addicted to opioids, and they get involved in sex trafficking to support their habit. Traffickers also use drugs as a means to coerce people, whether it's adults or whether it's children. Because if they're not meeting quota, if they're not doing what they tell them to do, they're going to withhold those drugs from them. So we see that quite often. Survival sex, that's another category that we investigate. So that could be for food, shelter, safety. It could be support a drug addiction, even though that's technically not survival, but it still falls under that category. We also have a huge issue with minors selling pictures of themselves online. And again, that's going to fall under that same category, that survival sex, even though they may not need the money for a survival need, but it still falls under that category. And that is a huge problem that we have. And then that's even a bigger problem that we've had over the last couple of years. Since COVID, everything went virtual. They were talking to their friends virtually. They were playing games, online gaming to communicate with their friends and stay interactive and social with their friends and their friend network. But traffickers are online as well. And of course, we've done social media recruitment training as part of this series as well. But I have to stress that really be paying attention to what your kids are doing online, not only on their cell phones, tablets, their gaming systems, because traffickers are out there actively recruiting. And kids know just from being around other kids or being on social media such as TikTok that they can make lots of money by selling pictures of themselves online. And it is becoming a huge problem that we investigate on a daily basis. Moving on to labor trafficking. Labor trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, soliciting, enticement, maintaining, or obtaining of a child for labor or services for the purpose of subjecting that person to child labor, involuntary servitude, peonage, where someone's held against his or her will to pay off debt bondage, or slavery. Coercion is required to be present in labor trafficking cases and on the federal definition. However, the state definition in Florida does not require there to be coercion, but we do have to prove force and fraud regardless of their age. So regardless whether they are a minor or whether they're an adult. So that's what differs between the labor trafficking definition and the sex trafficking definition. Because remember, in sex trafficking, you do not have to prove force, fraud, and coercion, where in labor trafficking, in the federal definition, you have to prove force, fraud, and coercion. In the state definition, you have to prove force and fraud. So forms of labor trafficking. You have domestic servitude, forced labor, debt bondage, involuntary servitude, child labor, slavery. As Robin mentioned, some common venues and industries, your agricultural, your hospitality and your restaurants, commercial cleaning, salons, construction, landscaping, domestic work, door-to-door sales, factories, the peddling and begging. The biggest thing that we see when we're dealing with minors is that door-to-door sales. That's a huge issue. Something to really remember in the state of Florida, if you're under the age of 14, you cannot work. If you are working, you have to have a work permit. So for instance, if you are in the entertainment industry, you work for Disney, just to give an example, you would have to have a work permit if you're under the age of 14. But if you do not have that permit, you cannot work. The only other stipulation is if your family owns the business. So say your family owns a restaurant, and after school, part of your chores is to go to the restaurant and sweep the floors and mop the floors or whatever. That's more of a chore because that's your family business. But if you have a 8-year-old that's working as a fry cook in the business, that's completely different, right? That would not be an appropriate role for that child within that family business. We see a lot of that door-to-door sales as well as that peddling and begging. We have a lot of organizations, really fraudulent organizations. They try to say, they're a 510c3 and they'll go out there and they're trying to say they're a legitimate business. Most often they're going to say they're an anti-drug, anti-alcohol business, but in fact, they're actually giving them drugs and alcohol to continue working for them. So we see that ongoingly in Florida and throughout our nation.
Yeah, and one of the things that it's really important to realize, no matter what the workplace is, that there are many common signs that could be present. So one of the things I'd like to go over with you now are both sort of the overall things you might see and also some caveats around this. So looking at the variety of businesses, you could imagine that just think about the list that Marina just went through. In each one of those places, there's an opportunity for that trafficking situation to show up somewhere in the community, very likely at a business. It could be that there's a traveling sales crew and they have to stop by when they're going from place to place at a convenience store to get gas, to use the bathroom, to maybe buy food or drink or snacks or something. That's an opportunity. And similarly, if somebody was in a restaurant or in a situation in any other kind of retail establishment or going into a hotel area. So there are many things you might see in common, regardless of the situation. And then there are things for each that are unique to each workplace. So we don't have time today to go through all the ways that you could have, what looks one way in a bank might not look the same way in a hotel. But we want to focus a little bit today on really what it looks like in common. The other part about this is, even as we go through and we talk to you about, this is what a victim looks like or might do or say, that might not be the case. Every situation is a little bit different. There's no single profile of a victim, no single profile of a trafficker. And you've heard us all say that a lot. So even when we give you things that might, indicate a red flag or might indicate a situation, it might not always be the case. So looking at this slide, it says no control over ID, funds, or credit cards. Well, you might have a victim who does have control over their ID, but they still may be trafficked, right? Or you might have someone who doesn't have control over these things who is not being trafficked. And that's why this training can be a little bit tricky in that regard, but just want to throw that out as kind of a caveat. when you look at this sort of constellation of these boxes, you can see that there are things that we see in a lot of trafficking situations. One is that the trafficker is in control and is controlling somebody, that victim. So know that there's often that power imbalance that you can detect in any situation. When someone's checking in at a hotel, when someone's ordering food at a restaurant, when someone's paying for candy bars and snacks at a convenience store, or whatever it might be. So you'll see a control issue, matched with somebody who lacks free agency. If you're in a situation where a victim is, say, just talking over, at a break area or sitting outside on a bench, and you overhear someone saying they haven't been paid, you see that they're injured, etc. You'll see some clues. We also know that traffickers in general isolate them from any kind of family or helper. So if you hear somebody talk about, I've been wanting to call my family back home for the past 6 months and I can't do it, I'm not allowed. You'll hear some, again, indications of lack of agency, lack of free will to be able to do what they want to do. We also have this, the bottom box in the middle is that victims' behavior include all these things, which is true. And I'll never forget when we were doing a training, and you might remember this. We were at the Carney Center, and Graciela's on the call, and a survivor told us, I was never those things in public. I was strong, and I was telling people I was strong. I was not submissive. I was not, always looking down. I was out there, and I was fierce. So again, know that these can vary, but this is what we see a lot. And again, to reiterate that the signs of this control might look different. If someone is just being coerced, for example, someone who comes to this country who is all excited about being here because he was promised a really great job, he was promised that he could start his own business, and he's going around from place to place with the trafficker who he doesn't know is going to be trafficking him. They might look like best friends because it's in the grooming trust building process. So I feel like I've said all this. This is a repeat of that, so we can skip this slide. I feel like I've repeated some things but these are signs that you can look for, and we'll talk more about other indicators.
So moving on to signs of sex trafficking. So I wouldn't stress too much on this first part, the seasonally situational inappropriate clothing. If you guys have minors, work with minors, you know that if you go to your local mall, you go to the local kid hangout, you'll probably see a lot of that. You'll probably see, kids that are in little booty shorts, and it's, 60 degrees outside, and we're all bundled up in our winter coats here in Florida, because anytime it drops in the 60s, we're freezing. So don't really pay attention a whole lot to that one, because it does vary, like Robin said. They use a language common in the sex industry. That's something that we really train our investigators and our social service workers to really pick up on when they're doing their interviews, when they're talking to minors, when they're working with minors and all levels of minors, whether it's high-risk minors or honor roll students, it really doesn't matter. They really need to be looking for that language. Of course, if they're involved in a commercial sex industry, that's a huge sign that they are possibly involved in sex trafficking. There is a difference between sex trafficking victim and prostitution. So we definitely need to really look closely. Again, oftentimes victims are not going to self-identify. So oftentimes they're going to say, this is my boyfriend, this is my girlfriend, that we're partners. No one's making me do anything. And again, whether that's a minor or adult. But really, when you start looking more closely, sometimes you can see that's not exactly the case. And where we see that most is that coercion piece. That piece oftentimes when maybe they are supplying them with drugs. And if they don't meet quota, they don't get more drugs. And it is a means of turning from that. Is it really a willing participant, or are they truly a victim of sex trafficking? That overprotective of phone and multiple devices. If you are working with folks that have multiple cell phones. Now, I have 2 cell phones. I have a personal one and I have a work phone, and many of you probably have the same. But when you are working with folks that probably have no need to have multiple devices, and they do, especially children, that's a huge red flag. They might have the cell phone that mom and dad's paying for, but they may have another cell phone. They're probably going to say their friend gave it to them. Again, your friends are probably not buying you cell phones. They're not paying your bills. So a huge red flag. That's probably not the case. A trafficker's probably given them that device. And their traffickers use those devices to keep control over them. They know where they go. Many of the apps that are on these phones have geolocation devices where they know and they can track them, where they're at all times, when they're coming and going. Cash apping and everything is done right off the phone. Branding and tattoos known for trafficking. Mental health and substance abuse disorders. We know traffickers oftentimes are going to prey on those vulnerabilities. And if they have mental health or substance abuse, those are huge vulnerabilities to be able to attract them and manipulate them. They are disconnected or disassociated with the world around them. There's a lot of movement oftentimes with trafficking. So they may be in Orlando one day, Gainesville the next, the Panhandle, Alabama, Atlanta, New York, they're all over quite often. They're going to follow the money. So oftentimes people ask me about, everybody knows about the Super Bowl. We've done a lot of work around the Super Bowl, which is great, but just know that that's not the only event that brings in a lot of trafficking. It's also on every day because there's buyers out there. There's also any type of large event. It could be anything, any sporting event. It could be any political event, regardless your party. It could be music festivals, things of that nature that are often brings large amounts of people. And when it brings large amounts of people, oftentimes there's a lot of buyers and they'll bring in people to work those events. So that's why you see a lot of the traveling going on. The isolation from family and friends, they're trying to separate them from their support systems. You see that also in domestic violence, right? They're trying to separate them. They don't understand you. They don't love you. They want us to break up. They're not supportive of us, and just continue to try to break those boundaries, whether it's an adult and it's with their family members or whether it's a child and it's their parents. They're not in control of his or her money. Now, they're going to tell you they're in control, but because they're going to say, well, when I want to go get my nails done, my hair done, they'll give me money. They're holding my money. They're making sure I'm using my money responsibly. But when you ask if they want to go buy a book or go to a movie, no, they would not be able to have access to that money. Again, like I said, they are wanting them to do things and buy things that for their appearance, right? The makeup, the perfume, the cologne, the hair, the nails, and the clothing. They want them to appear in a certain way and that the buyer would pay more money for. Unable to communicate without looking for someone else for answers. So you may be working with someone or talking to someone, or maybe someone comes into your business and you're asking them questions and they're constantly looking for someone else to answer for them. That's a huge red flag that something possibly is going on. Staying in a hotel or apartment for days without leaving or seeing others enter and exit the room, but the potential victim is never leaving, or if they're never leaving the hotel, they're eating out of the hotel restaurants or the hotel vending machines. We see quite often that they're not able to leave. Always paying for items with cash or prepaid cards or gift cards. Also, if they're checking into hotels with IDs that you pretty feel like they're probably not valid IDs, or they're probably not their proper ID, we see a lot of utilizing fake IDs, both for the victims and for the traffickers as well. They have multiple aliases. Some signs of labor trafficking: live where they work. In the state of Florida, we have laws against that. You cannot live where you work. So if you have a restaurant, you can't have multiple mattresses in the back where people are working. If you own a massage spa, you cannot have people sleeping on the massage tables. But we oftentimes we're seeing that and still see that. And of course, they can that would be breaking a law here in Florida. Bad or unsafe working conditions, long hours, no breaks or no time off. Work even if injured or unfit to perform the job duty. Signs of injury, abuse, neglect, or harassment. Wage theft or denied overtime and benefits. Asks for or cannot get food or steals food. Signs of malnourishment. Traveling sales crew with potential minors. Again, these traveling sales crews, they could be selling anything from magazines, dollar store trinkets. Again, we've seen meat out of trucks, palm trees out of trucks, Candy is a very common one, but oftentimes they're going to recruit minors, especially our runaway youth, and not only in Florida, but nationwide. The employers are providing drugs or alcohol to their workers, and business operations quickly leaves a location, oftentimes leaving behind their workers and the workers' belongings. We see this ongoingly with a lot of cases that we work where we get a tip, we go out, we make contact, we may need to do a follow-up the following day, and they're no longer here. And you go into the apartment and you can see where they left in a rush. They left with a lot of belongings behind, sometimes leaving their own kids behind. We've seen that where we made contact and maybe made contact with that kid at school. And by the time the kid goes home, they're gone. They've left, leaving that kid abandoned. So we see that many, many times in the cases that we investigate here in Florida.
Okay, so what we'd like to do now, if we have time, we have two, but we want to help walk through a couple of human trafficking scenarios and let you see where someone might appear in a scenario and what the response might be.
So this first scenario we're talking about is Jane is a 25-year-old female who's new in the area. Jane has recently left an abusive relationship and does not have family support. Jane has applied for employment at many local businesses, but has yet been hired. She has very little money and needs food and a place to live. Jane was approached by an older man that said he could help her. After a few days of living at his home, he told her he knew a way for her to make some fast cash. The man introduced her to his friend, and he took pictures of her in lingerie and began advertising her on the internet. Jane has been seen with an older male that has been known to abuse women. She was last seen by a clerk at the local Busy C gas station bathroom. While in the bathroom, she changed clothes and put on a wig and makeup. While she was inside the store, the clerk observed the older man pumping gas and counting a large amount of cash and constantly checking his cell phone. Jane returned to the older man and it appeared she asked him for some money. She returned to the store and purchased some condoms and some chips. The clerk observed several tattoos on Jane, such as diamonds and stars. Jane provided a note to the clerk that says, "My name is Jane and I need help." The clerk contacted 911, provided the license plate number and the vehicle and the description of Jane and the older man. Let's
talk about some of the clues that you see. Now, I will say this is a scenario that might be a little bit unusual because the victim may not provide that note like this. But up till then, you might say that clerk or anybody else in that convenience store might be able to note some clues. So could you all take a moment and then just put in the chat and let us all know, what clues? Clearly the note was a clue, right? So we're making that easy. But what were some of the other clues that you saw if you were, say, the clerk at the convenience store, or if you were a customer in the store coming in to buy, to buy some ice or something? What would you see as clues if you want to put those in the chat?
Absolutely, Robin. Majority of the cases, like I said throughout this presentation, victims of trafficking, again, minors and adults, do not self-identify. They have been, and again, that's a whole nother training, but there's a lot of trauma bonding that's going on. They feel they're in a partnership, they're in a relationship, or they're just the fear of if they talk, something really bad's going to happen to them or happen to the family. But we actually have had people do the same thing. We have had people put notes out there, or put write in lipstick on the bathroom mirror in the gas station. So it does happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it happens in a traumatic event. They know something really bad's probably possibly going to happen to them, or a threat's been made against their family, or what have you. Now, that doesn't mean that later on they may not recant. And again, that's a whole other training. But that's very common within trafficking as well, as there's a lot of recantment. There's a lot of, during that traumatic event, they may talk, and then later they feel fearful that something's going to happen, and they start backtracking.
Yeah, they see how it turned out. Well, yeah, we're getting some good comments that there's some changing of clothes, putting on, the makeup, nervous, the purchases. Yay, somebody said the purchases. There were some, kind of distinctive tattoos. Now, again, tattoos, everybody's got tattoos these days. So that's not an overall sign that someone's absolutely being trafficked. Of course not. But these are things, the checking of the phone, yes, asking. So yeah, she had to ask for money. She didn't have the money. So these are all things too that clerk in a good set of protocols at a convenience store, people would be trained to write these things down, to note these things, right? So that, and then if you see something really urgent, you already should have a protocol in place for when you call 911, when you suspect something, but you're not sure. So yeah, so let's talk about an outcome here, Marina. So what do you think?
So the outcome of this particular case, local law enforcement immediately responded to the gas station. They took custody of the note, and the clerk provided law enforcement the copy of the video surveillance. So that's really good with businesses, especially businesses that may be on this training. That video surveillance is so important. There's so much more information we can gather off of there, and it really launches our investigations. FHP performed a traffic stop on the vehicle. The older man, later identified as Fred B., was arrested on an outstanding warrant. Jane was questioned by a trauma-informed and victim-centered detective. Jane provided history that Fred was trafficking her and 3 other local women. Due to the quick action of the gas station clerk and the testimony of the victim, Fred B. was arrested on human trafficking charges and later sentenced to life in prison.
Okay, so before we go on to the next thing, I'd like to just take a moment and say, wow, what a great outcome. But really want everybody to think that this isn't something that just happens, automatically. These are actions that, someone needed to put 2 and 2 together. Maybe they saw her change clothes in the bathroom and thought, oh, that's weird. And then all of a sudden, they remember they took a training where, it was about trafficking and this age difference issue came up, or you noticed the guy counting money. Again, maybe none of these things in isolation would be a clue, but all those things together, and that they were noted, that they knew how to take action. Maybe in a business setting, you'd have a clerk say, I'm not exactly sure, and be able to immediately call management or call another clerk to say, this is what I'm seeing, what should I do? So these are all things that businesses, as they develop their protocols, will be able to have in place so that when this shows up, not if, but when this shows up, there'll be a way to take immediate action. Okay, great. Let's do the next one. Okay, Jose is 15 and resides in a home with 4 adults and at least 3 other minors. Jose is from Mexico and traveled to the U.S. without his parents. He was picked up by the U.S. Border Patrol and placed with an uncle, David Brown, in Jacksonville. There are concerns that his caregiver is not his uncle. Jose and the other minors are put in a van every day after school and on the weekend and taken to different neighborhoods to sell magazines. They do not know anyone in the neighborhoods, and while they're working, they must buy their own food and water. Jose appears depressed and is always falling asleep in class. Jose has been seen at the local corner store being picked up and getting into a car with different men. Sometimes he returns within 30 minutes and other times he's gone for longer periods of time. He's also been caught stealing food from the local stores in the community. It's also believed he's bathing in the store's restrooms. He has recently complained of his stomach and lower back pain, but refuses to provide explanation to the school nurse. The uncle has been called to the school to pick up Jose when he has not felt well. The uncle appears angry that Jose was drawing attention to himself and not concerned about Jose's well-being or possible illness at all. So here's a scenario where, again, what are some of the signs that someone might be, number one, trafficked? And where are places in the community, particularly in the business community, where his behavior might raise some red flags, might cause some concerns? What have you seen Jose do? Imagine the convenience corner store, whatever it is on a strip mall. There might be other stores there. You know how it is in a strip mall. People get to know one another, next door neighbor businesses, et cetera. But what are you seeing in this scenario with Jose that are some of the clues? If you're a business person or, you're just in the community. Okay, so here's part of the complaint. I'm not sure what, Amy Francis, you want to talk about which complaint that was? Has to purchase own food. lack of interest.
Maybe they complain of a stomach hurting. Stomach hurting.
Okay. And that might be because you were a teacher, or you could have just heard him. He could have said that to somebody whose house he went to try to sell a magazine. Falling asleep in class. Yeah, some labor trafficking. All the time, working, not able to stay awake. That would have been a sign for the school, both the school nurse and for the complete, right. Got it. Thank you, Amy. There might also be something around this showering, right? Bathing in the bathroom. Exactly, Beatrice, thank you. Bathing in the bathroom. That was another one. We often see that trafficking victims are not given access to food, to a place to shower or to bathe. They're often forced to work while injured, etc. So, okay, very good, everyone. What about the outcome? So in the outcome, it was determined that David Brown is, in fact, not the child's uncle. David and his friends visit Mexico. They'd go there and convince parents to allow their children to come back and make money and to send money back home. The children were told to tell the U.S. authorities they had family in Florida. So again, they were given a script. David and his friend were labor trafficking the children by, I think it's forcing them to sell magazines so they could send money home to the families. They would also sell the children for sex to supplement the income when they don't make enough money selling magazines. Jose and other children were seen by local store employees within the community, and those employees reported their concerns to the hotline. And that's where the law enforcement investigation was triggered and was completed. Marina, do you want to weigh in on any of this?
This is something that we see ongoingly as well. The falling asleep in class is something that we see all the time. And it's for multiple reasons. It could be for labor trafficking or sex trafficking. We've seen cases where children are cleaning office businesses with their families. Oftentimes the cleaning employer pays per office that they clean, so they will bring in the children so they can clean more offices over a short period of time, but they're up to 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and then they have to be up for school. So we see them falling asleep. So that's very common. Like you said before, the showering, bathing, washing off in the restrooms. Again, it could be labor trafficking, sex trafficking cases that we see with those as well. So that's just a few examples. We're going to move along and play a video. During this video, I want you to pay attention not only what's being said, but think about all the opportunities that you might possibly see trafficking occurring in businesses throughout this video. So the big thing out of that video is, can you see me? And there was multiple opportunities within that video. And if you want to join chat and talk about some of those opportunities and some of the things that you may have saw that really stood out. So besides the places, some of the things that really stood out for me with that video is it was clear there was some dysfunction in the family. There was some arguing that led to the child running away, which we see that oftentimes. But I said in the beginning of this presentation that depending on where you live in our nation and whether you're in an urban or rural area, a recruitment as soon as a runaway hits the streets is usually approached by a trafficker within 24 to 48 hours. In more urban areas, it's usually within hours. You know, as soon as that child can make it to the local truck stop, bus stop, park, traffickers are there waiting. And they're going to know that they probably left hastily. So they probably don't have money. They probably don't have food, clothes. They don't know where they're going to sleep. So they're waiting, saying they can help them. But as that scenario showed you, you know, after they're there for a few days, then what are you going to do for me? You need to make some fast cash. So that was one thing that I saw, the dysfunction family, the running away, the female recruiter, which we oftentimes see because oftentimes, especially other females might trust female counterparts or female peers over a male. So sometimes they might say, yes, I will go with you, or yes, I will accept your help, because they feel like the female is less threatening. So, Robin, is there any other comments in chat?
I see that people have noted the schools, medical professionals, guidance. Oh, that was for the other one. Bus stop, the diner, the hotel. I'd also add to that the taxi driver, when she was getting dropped off. So, yep, transportation, Uber, all of the places where, those bus stops, you just put transportation in a category, and I'll give you some resources at the end here that you can see more about that.
And they were in a hotel. I don't know if you noticed in the video when they were all in there, you could tell by the card scanner on the door, but they were in a hotel. So that's very common also, that they're in hotels, motels, in your local areas as well.
And that's just one scenario. So just off the top, there's 4 or 5 different places where businesses, he was counting out $100 bills at that diner. So yeah, all those are clues. So thank you. And in the interest of time, we're going to move forward. This is a lot on this slide, but it's just to give you an idea of these are all things that responsible management in particular should be doing and thinking about regarding human trafficking. So all of these things about, knowing the signs, knowing your local law enforcement, all the issues around implementing, developing protocols that include things like points of contact. Very often in a business or in an office, you'll have someone who has a responsive. I always think about like the fire drill person, who always gathered everybody to know what to do during a fire drill. But it's like that. How do you get somebody who's going to be your point of contact for talking about a possible situation or acting, having appropriate, signage up, materials available, and also what you do as a business. How are you making sure that your third-party contractors, the people that you're hiring, whether it's to clean your offices or business, whether it's somebody that you're, at the bottom one here about who are you hiring to be your employee assistance provider, your lawyers? Or do you have private security? How are you making sure as a workplace or as a workforce that trafficking is not entering either with a trafficker and a victim, or via even your own materials? Your own internal workings of your business. One of these things, the second to the bottom, include an anti-human trafficking clause in contracts. That could be something as simple as saying this contract must not be carried out with the use of any trafficked labor, any forced labor. That's a very easy thing for someone to do right now, just to make sure. And then that person you're contracting with would say, well, how do I know that? How do I make sure? And again, that'll help trigger some more information. Okay, the next slide. So with this next slide, you can see some tips for employees that we've pulled together, which is, again, everybody knowing the signs, knowing when to call 911, making sure that employees don't confront. Imagine that earlier situation with Jane. Things could have really gone south quickly, been very dangerous. And to your point, Marina, where victims don't necessarily understand at the time that they're being trafficked, that could really force somebody into a dangerous situation. So not confronting or advising somebody, again, this is all part of training, taking down all of that information. We've talked about that, knowing where to report, we'll give you that information. And then, when do you and how do you alert management with your suspicions? And then being part of the team that figures out what to do next. Sometimes you don't know what to do. It might not be a clear-cut case. So how do you figure all that out? Okay, next slide. So this is just a little thing I wanted to add in here for you all. There are a lot of abuses in our state and elsewhere about labor subcontractors, third-party contractors. Sometimes the principal corporation will try to hide behind the labor contractor, even though they're supposed to get maybe lowest and best contract amount or charge charges for doing a particular job, that could end up being just outlandishly low. And you, as the principal corporation, you don't go behind that and say, how in the heck can you do all this work for this much money, which is not very much? Well, it might be because they're actually exploiting the labor. It can be very difficult to find them. And when I say the whack-a-mole problem, we see this a lot with massage establishments where as well. But, with labor subcontractors, if there's any charge or any sort of trouble that happens with a labor subcontractor, they reconstitute their business in another community or under another relative's name or under another name. And you haven't really done anything to that labor contracting operation. All they've done is changed management or locations because you haven't been able to get in and stop them. So we know that that is a problem in the business world. And again, a place where a lot of abuses take place. Next slide, please. I mentioned this very briefly, but know that, the supply chain is a really important thing for all of us to know. Are we eating fish that comes from a fishing industry that's trafficking labor? Are our clothes also similarly being are part of a trafficking operation in terms of labor trafficking? This resource up here from the Human Trafficking Legal Center.org, please take a look at this, but just know that, forced labor is real across the globe and it comes to us locally. You have a choice as a consumer on what to do, and you can figure out, look at these numbers, 144 billion worth of goods each year enter our labor markets, and 500 million at least this year was stopped. No, to our own FSU Human Trafficking and Exploitation Law Project is focusing on this issue. Okay, next slide, please. Again, we've got resources. This is all going to be up on the website, whether it's hotels, global businesses. There's your convenience store link. You can have this information. Lots of folks are recognizing the issue. Next slide. And here's some other great resources. Again, this top one at Polaris, please take a look at that. That goes through at least, I think, half a dozen different industries and how human trafficking is part of what they do and where there can be a solution. And then this last link is one I talked to you earlier about, ORC, Organized Retail Crime and Human Trafficking. Again, should be part of every business's loss prevention work legally. Okay, next slide.
And also on the on-ramps, the intersections, the rest stops, rest areas, the Florida law also requires there to be signage for anti-human trafficking and with information on who to call as well. So we're attacking it both on federal and state levels. Moving on to who to call if you suspect adult or a child is being exploited for trafficking. So if it's a minor, you're going to call the Florida Abuse Hotline, and that's 1-800-96-ABUSE. Of course, if that person, whether they're an adult or a minor, is in an imminent risk of danger, you need to always call 911 because they can be the first ones to get there. But the Florida Department of Children and Families is a 24/7 hotline. We do have a 2-hour response, up to 2 hours on immediate cases and 24 hours for all other cases. We only have 2 response times here in the state of Florida. The National Human Trafficking Tip Line, which is 1-888-373-7888. And again, that is a tip line. So it's only as good as the person that, the hotline makes it and they send it out through email. And that goes to federal, state, and local law enforcement. But it's only as good as the person's responding to that email. So I really stress to you, if it's an imminent danger, you need to call 911 or the non-emergency number through the sheriff's office or police departments, and obviously call the tip line if that's what it is, a tip, because we want to make sure we get the appropriate response for that whatever that is occurring. You can also see the QR code that I talked about in the beginning of this training. If you scan this QR code, you're going to be able to file your suspicions or file a report, and that's going to go directly to the National Human Trafficking Tip Line. Or if there is a local hotline within that state or community, it will also go to them as well. So it's just an easy way to have access right on your cell phones.
That's a cool thing. I haven't seen that before. You brought it to brought it to this presentation. Thanks.
Very good.
Okay, next slide, and
The next is questions.
we are 1 minute over, Marina. So I had asked earlier if anybody had any questions. I didn't see any come in, but as we're wrapping up, let's first of all, Marina, thanks. This was great. I appreciate it so much.
And of course, if you're not comfortable asking your question in chat or what have you, feel free to email either Robin and I. We're always available. I am best reached by email. I'm usually on it again 24/7. So if you have a question or you run across something you just really don't know what to do, feel free to reach out to myself or to Robin, and we will walk you through the steps and figure out exactly what we need to do to make sure the person you're concerned about is safe.
Absolutely. Thank you. And yeah, so my number 2 is phone and text. Both are great. So thanks again, everybody.